Now, I'm old enough to remember, and some of you may be in the same boat. They used to have this commercial where they'd have like a frying pan. They'd put an egg on there, and they'd say,
"That's your brain.
This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs."
Yep.
It was a thing. I don't know when they stopped doing that.
I don't know either.
I think once they got in the way of big pharma, they're like, hey, this is, your brain with our product would be even better,
right.
or something. But you kind of look at your brain as like, hey, this is my own private space, and you don't think of people being able to get in there and influence you. Well, there's a very intentional effort to do just that. But information is your weapon. Your ability to fight back is to be prepared. Ignorance is not bliss.
Nope.
Ignorance is dangerous. Ignorance leads to death. And we want to keep you informed. And nobody in this world that I know of can keep you more informed. As more deep diving research, notes, kicking over the rocks, international newspapers on the outside of America looking in, inside looking out, all the way around, then the one, the only Mel K.
Yay!
Hello. It's been too long. I love your audience, the best of the best. Really. And it's been way too long. I love you guys. I'm so happy to be back on Flyover Conservatives. The work you are doing is extraordinary. And I'm really, really excited to get into what is going on today that I think people should know.
I know.
No doubt about it. And like before we started recording, I told you, literally, I have all of these cards ready to take notes. Every time that we're ever on with you, I learn so much, and so do the Flyover audience. And so we're so excited.
Learn a lot. I will tell the audience today, we're fighting an information battle, and the only way to do that is information gets in the hands of people that you know, love, and care about. So hit the like button on this. It makes a big difference. Personally, text this to someone. They get the information. Maybe text it to a friend and say, hey, this kind of got me thinking. Let's watch this. Let's go grab coffee. We need to figure this out together. Maybe we're the ones that need to step up and save our own lives, the world that we live in. If you want more information, access firsthand to the information, you want to go to themelkshow.com. When you go there, two things you want to do. One, register for the newsletter, because that way you're in the loop. She's not going to blow
it every week.
It's not like Kohl's or something. She's not going to blow you up with irritating stuff like that. It's only information that is important that you need in a timely fashion. So go there. Sign up for the newsletter. Number two, there's a section there called resources. The reason she called it that is because that's where she keeps all the resources.
That's where the receipts are.
It's shooting straight. And what she does is, in an episode like this, there are sometimes hundreds of resources, receipts that she keeps. Doesn't say, hey, this is what I think. She only talks about what she knows. She keeps a list of those things on her website. So you want to go there. You want to save it. Make it a tab on your browser. Every image that we show during today's episode, you can also receive by texting 40509, the word MEL, M-E-L, 40509, the word MEL, and because we don't even usually get to all of the pictures and images and headlines and things like that, but you want to use them. They're not just there for you to collect like little spoons or something like that. They're there. You take the images. It's a headline. It's a newspaper. It's a way that you could share it on social media. It's a way you send it to a friend. Like, did you know this?
To wake people up.
And then you can take that headline and find that original source document yourself. We got to be informed. We got to move from the place of speculation and rumor and I heard. And this is what gets you the firsthand information, which is actually a weapon in your hand. And we're talking today about protecting your mind. This is the best way to do it.
All right, Mel. So we're ready. Let's kind of fill in the Flyover audience of what we're actually going to be talking about.
Get my brain
today.
warmed up here. I don't want to like pull a hamstring or something here with the Mel K download.
You have to. Well, first and foremost, people should know that we are in an information war, as everyone does know, but it's a little bigger and more intense than that. And I think a lot of people know something is wrong, and there's a lot of manipulation. I know people were worried about the emergency test and some other things, a lot of diversion, but there are forces out there that are redefining life on this planet, and they have no authority to do so. And we still are contending with people that say that you guys and I always talk about it. There is a they do not hide it. Their goal is global governance. It's been a long plan. You guys and I have done 2 years worth of shows laying it out again and again. It's the same people. It always leads to the same money. As most people know, I firmly believe that this country has been captured, at least our political system, by a global oligarchy of billionaires, and they don't have allegiance to any nation. They don't have allegiance to any flag or any people. They run as kind of a blob, and their goals are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030. Every single one of these groups that I call the octopus of global control from that great book by Charlie Robinson are connected, and all of their websites, if you go to them, you will find the exact same verbiage, the exact same global governance goals, and that includes not just the tentacles of the UN, World Economic Forum, World Health Organization. It also includes the IMF and World Bank, the Bank of International Settlements. It also includes a lot of NGOs, including the Rockefellers NGO, Gates NGO. It includes a 2030 agenda. They all have their 2030 agenda at NASA, at the Vatican, all over the EU. This is what we're contending with right now. And it is my belief that we are also dealing with a situation where most people do not know that Barack Obama in 2015 signed on to the Agenda 2030. And at that point, he signed on to also follow the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and started to implement a lot of these globalist things like net zero and sustainable cities. And slowly but surely, we've gotten to the place we are, but we were not aware of it. Nobody in the United States ever even really heard of it. But it was a long game plan. It was originally Agenda 21. The entire agenda, if you do go through it, is about a one world global governance. So a lot of people talk about how George H.W. went on the ground of the UN, announced that there was a new world order coming. It would be run by the UN, and that was that. Everyone just thought, I don't know what he's talking about. What is he? It's some kind of alliance or whatever. Well, it culminates in Agenda 2030, and it is about full track, trace, surveillance, and capture of all humanity, but also these people under the guise of the IPCC is one of their wings, which is the climate change narrative. A lot of it's about narratives that connect. There's also the whole central bank digital currency is connected to this. We've talked about it on here many times. The global digital ID. Now, if people weren't paying attention last week, there was something that looked literally like, and I can't stop saying it because there's nothing more to compare it to than Pan Am in Hunger Games, and the wards and how they run Hunger Games is very similar to the global governance. And this was all plotted and planned out way back with Kissinger and Rockefeller and Brzezinski and basically, most people know Rockefeller funded the UN, the Trilateral Commission, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Club of Rome, which was Limits of Growth, which started the climate change narrative. And all of this culminates in a full, total, surveilled track and trace. Eugenics also is involved in who will be born. A lot of it connects, and a lot of people really woke up to this idea. A lot of people heard about it, called conspiracy theory, whatever. But during COVID, if you were at all honest with yourself and what you were seeing and putting together the dots, there was a global lockstep movement called the Great Reset that we've talked about, but they were all announcing it. The first person to announce it was then Prince Charles, now King Charles. But we saw every world leader. That was around the time, probably 3.5, 4 years ago, when people like myself started saying, I think these people at the World Economic Forum are kind of like the PR organizers of this whole thing. And since that time, that's become kind of mainstream understood. Mm-hmm. So where we are today, and what I wanted to talk about today is the next level of control that I believe is a military level control. This goes back to, and it's on my resources page too. We talked about a long time ago, and people can look it up. There was a Satanist who ran the Army's Psychological Operations Division. He picked up where the Nazis left off in Mind Control, MK Ultra, and Monarch, Mind Control, and other things. His name was Michael Aquino, Colonel Michael Aquino. He wrote
the guy with the crazy eyebrows guy?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Oprah had him on, and what a surprise. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so he took all the work of the Nazis doing mind control experiments, putting, electronics in people's brains, all kinds of stuff. Certainly a lot of the shock therapy, a lot of the violent, brain mapping and all of that. And he took it to the next level under the CIA MK Ultra program, which was discontinued to a certain extent. And he wrote a document that was classified, but then was released, at least as much as we can see of it, called Mind Wars. And in this Mind Wars, he talked about that the future of warfare would be they would take down nations without firing a shot by destroying the population. And it all sounded very, and he actually said in that document, which can be found on my resource page, his document, under opposition playbook section, he actually said in this document that that the way that this would happen would be similar to, I know you guys have had on G. Edward Griffin, and have people, most of that have seen on my show or your show, know about the Yuri Bezmenov interview that he gave when he came to America to G. Edward Griffin in the 80s, when he talked about how Russia and the communists were going to take down America from the inside out by infiltrating all of our institutions and all of our academia, all of our government, and basically demoralize, dehumanize, normalize, crisis, all of this stuff that we have seen play out pretty much in our faces as planned. The question, though, is it's not the USSR anymore. And now the enemy, as most of us know and have to be honest, worldwide, which people have to understand, is a false narrative that there is that Trump, honestly, and his supporters, according to Joe Biden and his regime, that is globalist regime, is the problem. And I keep saying, you guys and I know that for a long time, Trump was saying, I just talked to General Flynn about this as well. They're not after me, they're after you, and I'm in the way. Well, I would redefine this at this point with what is happening right now is they're not after America. They're after the world, and America is in the way.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and these people have changed their narrative a lot. You guys, Colton and myself, we did a show probably almost 2 years ago about their whole idea of a natural asset class. And that sounds all good and stuff. And it's the same billionaires, the oligarch billionaires that I talk about that I think fully control this country right now, just a small handful of them. But they talked about taking all natural resources on planet Earth. That would be, land, water, air, humans, animals, cyberspace, all of it into a natural asset class so that they can control it. And a lot of this goes back to, what a lot of people thought that there was a book written by Carol Quigley called Tragedy and Hope. And he was a professor and one of Bill Clinton's mentors at Georgetown. He wrote also in tandem with Rockefeller about a elitist class that was far more suited with running the country, let alone the world, than the people. And that has taken on many iterations. And I believe that to go full circle into what we're talking about today, when Obama signed on to Agenda 2030, that was after he had already reversed the laws that were put in after World War II, the Smith-Mundt Act. He had reversed it, Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, to use propaganda on we the people in certain circumstances. This all led down, it was a march. I also firmly believe that the collapse of the markets in 2000 and 2008 was the march towards the central bank digital currency. All of these moves that were made, a lot under both Bushes, Clinton, Obama, and Biden, in my opinion, are all globalists. They're all in on it, and they were all doing their part along the way. But when Obama did the modernization of Smith-Mundt, turning it around to make it legal to propagandize on us, we were thinking traditional propaganda. And he also started something called the Brain Initiative, Obama. And that's where I think we are right now. And we have to understand how advanced the technology, especially through working with the military and DARPA and other groups, a lot of partners of the World Economic Forum involved, how far this MK Ultra type mind control has gotten, and what are we dealing with right now? Because right now we are seeing a exaggerated attempt to not just what is happening to Donald Trump, but also the Trump derangement syndrome, that there are people that are, in any other circumstance, they're kind of reasonable. But if you show what they're doing to Trump, they want to take his businesses and auction them off,
Yeah.
his 91 felonies, one after another. And there are people cheering this on that have lost all sense of decency and fairness and compassion and empathy just at the
Right.
sight of Trump, just at the thought of Trump. They, as if he's not even human. And this man did nothing evil, nothing wrong. In fact, he did a lot right. But these people that would seem reasonable, they also happen to be the same people that jumped hook, line, and sinker into COVID, and ostracized and said people that didn't get the jab should go put in jail, and all of that. They're the same people that also, the minute the Ukraine narrative came, they wanted to cancel every Russian person in America and elsewhere. And, it's a major, and these are, I think it was Dr. Malone and Professor Desmond that talked a long time ago, and we've talked about it many times. And I've studied totalitarianism through Hannah Arendt for a long time. Mass psychosis is a real thing, and I do believe that we have to look at that. But just for your audience, because I know that they're very astute, I would suggest that everyone please go and read the Newsweek magazine article that came out by William Arkin. 10/4/23 just came out. It's exclusive. Donald Trump followers targeted by FBI as 2024 election nears. And we cannot beat the enemy if we don't know who they are and what they're doing. So I do want people
They're
to
just
understand.
right out in front and saying that.
Yeah.
Everybody wearing a denim shirt has got to go down. I'd be like,
Yeah, I got to tell you, it is one of the most disturbing pieces of writing I've seen, and I dig into some real bad stuff, and this is really, really disturbing. So basically, it's saying that the Federal Bureau of Investigations, and don't forget, we just saw Peter Strzok on TV with Bush acolyte Nicole Wallace, who's not a reporter, by the way. She worked for Bush. Having a show where Peter Strzok, still free somehow after Russiagate, was saying that the FBI needs agents to protect the FBI. Okay, there's really, really upside down things going on. And I know you guys have had on some of the FBI whistleblowers, as I have. They have been warning us. And this article is very, very important because it validates everything they've been saying, and the warnings, and what really, I believe, happened on January 6th has been orchestrated to get to this point. So
so we can actually put that in the text. So if you want to text into 40509, text the word Mel, we'll put that in the text so you all have that article.
Everybody can see and feel this. Like when you just walk around the world, when you have third grade classrooms with a litter box in the bathroom because kids will walk around, there's a mental health crisis, but it's not just the ones that are, that scenario. You sense it. 1 out of 8 Americans are on some sort of SSRI. 1 in 8. So there's a lot, and those affect sexuality. Those affect your mood. Those affect there's all of these facets, and you see it and you can feel it. And people, if you were to go out and mention someone like who was Kyle Rittenhouse, and you just grab people in the mall, you're going to get 2 totally different stories.
Exactly.
And it's not just that they're going to have different data points. A well of emotion that goes with it that's just unheard of throughout human history, that you could just how could you have a different narrative out there like that, and people so deeply committed to that storyline? It's because of this 2012 Smith Bundy. I mean, people are being gaslit and manipulated, and I do think it is much more on one side of the aisle than the other, just because most conservatives take in a lot of liberal media.
Yeah.
And
and what you're saying is so important. Don't forget, manipulating people's emotions. We have to remember what are they doing that we are not being told. And I'm going to get into it, and it's a little disturbing, but we have to remember there is a war on God, and there is a war on faith, and it's coming from these same people. I will connect it in a minute, because another agency that has an Agenda 2030 playbook is NATO. And I've said many times, it is my belief from my work, NATO was once a defensive force against the USSR. It should have ended then. NATO now, I believe, is the one world military. And I believe that Joe Biden is a one world globalist, and so are the people around him. And as we've watched the degradation of our military on many fronts, including, training and letting down our capabilities, but also we have been sending all of our weapons and technology to Ukraine. And it does appear that NATO is basically building some kind of base of whatever in Ukraine. But the problem is that we have sent $125 billion. But like I was saying before, I got sidetracked. About a week and a half ago, the UN had their big meeting. The UN also was joined by the Clinton Global Initiative back on stage. And also all the BlackRock and the banks, and also the IMF and the World Health Organization, to announce basically Agenda 2030, halfway point. They had a big event. It literally looked like Pan Am before they picked the people they're going to send out to kill each other in the wards. But it was so ostentatious, and really, they were talking about that the real rebuild cost of Ukraine, folks, $600 billion. The country was basically broke. So what is really going on in Ukraine and NATO, as far as I can see at this point? Donald Trump did say these people have all the money, all the power, and they have their own military. I believe their own military is NATO, because why would they all have the same language, the same literature, the same 2030, all of this? Did anyone in any of the nations involved vote for this? Was this involved in any debates anywhere? Do the American people know this? So I'm going to connect that back to this, but I just want to tell your audience so that they know and they can, prepare and fight back inside, because this is an internal war, and every individual has to go inside themselves as a sovereign individual with your individual brain and mind and ability, and really, figure out their part in this, because it's a war for your mind, and you are the only one that can fight it, really. So the FBI has decided is to pursue and prevent what it calls domestic terrorism without reference to political parties or affiliations, it says. But what it is saying is the FBI is in an almost impossible position, says current FBI official. Everyone in this article chose to remain anonymous, but I see some of them in this that I'm pretty sure what I saw on Nicole Wallace's show is echoed here. The official said the FBI is intent on stopping domestic terrorism and any repeat of January 6th attack on the Capitol, which is unraveling in real time. So they have to double down on it, of course. Yeah. The Bureau must also preserve the constitutional rights of all Americans to campaign, speak freely, and protest the government. By focusing on former President Trump and his MAGA supporters, the official said, the Bureau runs the risk of provoking the very anti-government activists that the terrorism agency hopes to counter. It says, especially at a time that the White House is facing congressional Republican opposition claiming Biden administration has weaponized the Bureau against right wing, it has to tread very lightly. But it does go on to say that that the Department of Homeland Security data that tracks incidents, threats, investigations, and cases to try to build a bigger picture has been looking at this, and many question calling this domestic terrorism. But it goes on to say the current political environment is not something the FBI is necessarily responsible for, nor should it be. But the threat posed by domestic violence extremists is persistent, evolving, and deadly. The FBI goal is to detect and stop terrorist attacks, and our focus is on potential criminal violations, violence and threats of violence, anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremism in one category of domestic terrorism, as well as the FBI top threat priorities. We are committed to protecting the safety and constitutional rights of all Americans, going on to say that they have data that says Biden administration has presented Trump and MAGA as existential threats to American democracy and talked up the risk of domestic terrorism and violence associated with 2024. Joe Biden, in a speech this week, said Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans are the threat to the very soul of this country. MAGA Republicans aim to question not only the legitimacy of past elections, but elections being held now and in the future. The second head of Homeland Security says the use of violence to pursue political ends is a profound threat to the public safety and national security. It is a threat to our national identity, our values, our norms, our rule of law, and our democracy, speaking about MAGA Republicans. Merrick Garland says attacks by domestic terrorists are attacks on us collectively, aimed at rendering the fabric of our democratic society and driving us apart. Chris Wray says, not an isolated event, what happened on January 6th. It's not going away anytime soon. The Department of Homeland Security has upped their task force for domestic violence extremism and further increases that. DHS and FBI say socio-political developments such as narratives of fraud in the recent general election, the emboldening impact of the breach of the Capitol on January 6th, conditions around COVID-19 pandemic, and conspiracy theories promoting violence will almost certainly spur more domestic terrorists to engage in violence. They have started a new group for the MAGA Republican and Trump supporters that they now call, it is called Domestic Violence Extremists Emboldened in Aftermath of Capitol Breach, Elevated Domestic Terrorism, Threat of Violence Likely Amid Political Transitions and Beyond. It now calls it the AGAAVE, Anti-Government, Anti-Authority, Violent Extremists. Furtherance of ideological agendas, furtherance of political and or social agendas. Now, that's anyone can go and read the rest. It gets worse from there. But what I have to say is that they are, first of all, the war is on us. It is not us on them. And everyone that's honest knows this. The problem is, as I said, this is a war between globalism and Agenda 2030, because I firmly believe if they do manipulate and steal, and we do not stand up and have resolve between now and 2024, if the 2024 is a one-party win across the board, which is what they are telling us in our faces, it will be whether we like it or not, which is why we have to mobilize now, the country will no longer be a constitutional republic. The Bill of Rights and the Constitution will be second to the globalist governance. Agenda 2030 will be the law of the land. And that is what they just talked about at the UN last week. We know that Joe Biden is signing on to the World Health Organization treaty, which, under the name of a pandemic can supersede all of our healthcare worldwide. But also, I know your audience probably knows this, at the World Health meeting last month, they redefined pandemic to include climate change, climate emergency, gun violence, systematic racism, and a whole bunch of things that have nothing to do with health.
They might as well add tomfoolery.
Yeah, I mean, anything.
And general shenanigans. Whatever. Just make up something.
Right. And and that's what they can do. So what they're doing is, we've talked about many times on lawfare, they change words to mean something else. So as it goes on in this article, it is threatening also journalists. It is threatening podcasters, anyone. So most of people that are watching this now know that Canada and the EU have passed laws to basically be able to monitor and remove any streaming content or online content that the government feels is dangerous. And as it says here, even in America, anti-authority, anti-government. Last I looked in America, we were allowed to be both of those things. But according to the FBI, it has gotten so out of hand because of Trump's supporters that they've had to have a new task force. They're also upset. They would like to also make sure that they're looking into anarchists, militias, sovereign citizen groups. And they're also looking into people that encourage domestic violence and domestic extremism. A friend of both of ours, Owen Shore, is about to go to jail.
That's sickening.
Calling for peace at January 6th, mind you, on camera. As many people, you guys know, a lot of people that have been railroaded in that realm too. Obviously, everyone can see what they're doing to Trump. So when you read this, you think, well, what is really going on here? Because we all know that when they say white supremacy, I believe that they're talking about capitalism and not white supremacy. What they're talking about is these global elites, they're elites to themselves, but this global billionaire oligarchy, what they do want is a hardcore socialist / communist system They've not hid that they track and trace surveillance in China,
Mhm.
and the whole 17 development goals do not work without full track and trace surveillance, digital ID, digital passports connected to your biometrics, and all of that. But I want people to understand that there's another thing going on here, and it's not just information warfare and putting out an article like this, and then the article goes viral, and now everyone that reads it, if they're on the side of truth and honesty and the Constitution and what America stands for, they would be horrified and disgusted. But I assure you that there is a ilk on the left, including CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, and Politico, all Atlantic, that are cheering this on. Okay, so we have to remember that is true. And now the question is, who is playing who here? Because this is where I look at this, and I think that this is like you brought up before, David, that during the pandemic and at other times, or even with the LGBTQ plus thing, where you have cat, and we're championing and excited and I guess promoting mental illness to be like something glamorous or something you should cheer on, while we're not doing anything for the mentally ill. It's quite the opposite, like you said, throwing them on drugs or whatever. And then the opposite is that everything clearly was a globalist agenda. It happened in every nation, even what's going on at our border. We're seeing it in Italy. We're seeing it in Germany. We're seeing it everywhere. This is not an accident. And so I wanted to discuss what I think people should know about NATO.
Yes.
Okay?
Please do.
Yes, for sure.
Because I am pretty sure from my research here and a lot of work I've done, because it's come up again and again, when you read NATO's documents lately, and one in particular, they are speaking as if they are above the sovereign nations that they claim to be an alliance of's military. And we, as the United States and the EU, basically, they are the military of the EU, any of those states. But now they're adding more and more states. Now, Stoltenberger, who runs NATO, he's the secretary, he, in a press conference 2 weeks ago, see, the narrative is changing on Ukraine pretty quick. 2 weeks ago, he said that it was a fact that Russia only went into Ukraine because they threatened NATO expansion on the border at Ukraine, and that was agreed upon in the Minsk agreements. We know that Merkel and Trudeau and other people have said, Macron, that when they signed the Minsk agreements with Russia not to expand NATO on their border, including Ukraine, that they knew that they were lying when they did it, but they needed time to get enough weaponry to Ukraine so that they could take down Russia. Again, the whole concept of taking down Russia has been going on for decades, without the endless wars. But at this point, taking down Russia is a strategic move, and it's not. But again, we all remember when Madeleine Albright laughed, or not laughed, but basically somebody said, "Well, taking out Saddam Hussein would mean hundreds of thousands of innocent people dying," and she kind of said, "Well, that's the price we'll have to pay." Well, you won't have to pay it, but dead people in Ukraine and Iran and Iraq or wherever will have to pay it. So I'm looking at NATO, and I have been for a while, and I see this document come out. I saw it a long time ago, but then again this week, I was reminded of it while I was watching all of this and watching all these people because I am watching the people come through the border, and we saw the whole Black Lives Matter uprising. It came, it went. The Women's March came and went. LGBTQ, Antifa came and went. These aren't organic. We've identified on this show, particularly the NGOs and the globalist billionaire class that fund the NGOs that have led to these things. But the idea of NATO continuing to expand and continuing to talk about how they pretty much are the hub for all these militaries. Now, what people also might not know is that NATO has taken over the largest Navy base in America in Virginia. And people say, oh, well, NATO's in every country. Well, NATO, the guy that's the head of the base in Virginia is not American. Okay. And NATO is aligned with who? The UN, and the World Economic Forum. So NATO's aligned. So NATO's on our soil running a giant base and does not have to adhere to the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or any of the sovereignty or the customs or culture of America, because they are an outside force that were given that land in Virginia. Next to it is the NATO information hub. It's an information hub there that is for cognitive warfare study. So on the screen right now is cognitive warfare. This is the document that I pulled up this week when I was looking at, what is going on here? How far is this going? You guys have had on General Flynn and obviously about 5G warfare and that book and Boone Cutler. Now, this is a whole 5G warfare. We are in an information war. We've known that for a long time. Obama made propaganda legal. Obama also did the BRAIN initiative. A lot of this comes together. So this 2020 NATO document comes into play, I think, here. It says that while actions taken in the 5 domains are executed in order to affect on the human domain, cognitive warfare's objective is to make everyone a weapon. The brain will be the battlefield of the 21st century. Humans are the contested domain. Future conflicts will likely occur amongst the people digitally first, then physically thereafter, in proximity to hubs of political and economic power. This document goes on to really lay out, and they've partnered apparently this entire NATO innovation hub, this cognitive warfare, a battle for your brain. And they do not hide this. This document is on their website, and it's laying out how they are fighting this war. And I believe this is the war that we are in. And it goes on to say the human is very often the main vulnerability, and it should be acknowledged in order to protect NATO's human capital, but also to be able to benefit from the adversary's vulnerabilities. The objective of cognitive warfare is to harm societies, not only the military. And when you put together, if my hypothesis is right, and NATO is the one world governance, WEF, UN, our common agenda, all of them, if this is their military, and then it goes on later in this document to say that the biggest partner in this innovation hub and cognitive warfare is the Pentagon and DARPA. So if you and then you think of the verbiage in that Newsweek article coming out of the FBI,
right,
and you get more deeper into it, then it goes on to say basically that the entire population it says also include working closely with academia to weaponize social sciences and human sciences and help the alliance develop its cognitive warfare capabilities. It goes on to say the militarization of brain science, and remember Obama started that brain initiative with lots of that. It also says an embedded fifth column where everyone, unbeknownst to him or her, is behaving according to plans of one or of our competitors. Our competitors in this document are China and Russia. But I don't know and in some of the NATO documents, especially the main one and another one that we'll bring up in a second, they lay out a lot of scenarios where they're talking about cognitive warfare and how they can use it. One being Donald Trump and his problems with the 2020 election. One being the lie that Russia hacked into the DNC server before the 2016 election, but they're putting them out there as truth. And these people obviously know, A, what happened in the 2020 election, and B, that Russia did not hack Hillary's server or the DNC server. So they're using things that we already know, and then they're passing them around to all their partners. And they're very, very partnered with the global public-private partnership of the World Economic Forum. And in the development at this NATO hub for cognitive warfare in Virginia, they talk a lot about teaming up with academia, particularly Johns Hopkins and MIT. And they talk a lot about the public-private partnership stakeholders, which if you dig into that will be the public-private partnership stakeholders of the World Economic Forum as well. So this is where, if you want to put it all together, it gets a little dicey. So I do want to say, so there was an event that they held, NATO, to talk about. They do this innovation challenge, which I was looking through all of the recent ones. And there was one in particular in Canada. And in this document, it says cognitive warfare seeks to change not only what people think, but also how they act. Attacks against the cognitive domain involve the integration of cyber, disinformation, misinformation, psychological, and social engineering capabilities. Cognitive warfare positions the mind as a battle space and contested domain. Its objective is to sow dissonance, instigate conflicting narratives, polarize opinion, and radicalize groups. Cognitive warfare can motivate people to act in ways that can disrupt or fragment an otherwise cohesive society.
Wow.
Have we ever seen, and that's on the screen right now, is destabilization of a nation using cognitive warfare. And we've never seen anything like what's going on in America with the destabilization. The open borders is causing a total crisis in terms of cohesiveness. We have been divided and sliced into pieces of basically like lunch meat. It's so thin now, all the different factions and this, and then it's by race and class and gender and all of this. And where's it coming from? And then they say conspiracy theory to point over there. But these are documents from the military, from this one world military that should have been broken up a long time ago.
Yeah.
That maybe once was defensive, but if you read their documents, and I ask people to do that, you have to question yourself, defensive against who? Because a lot of this also goes along with we've talked about, obviously, on here, and your audience obviously knows this, the Patriot Act that was forced upon us under the War on Terror, which is now the War on Domestic Terrorism, was used in the seditious conspiracy cases that have put people away for almost 20 years that were at the Capitol or that weren't at the Capitol, like Enrique Tarrio and other people. They're adding these domestic terrorist charges and holding people because of the Patriot Act, which people should know was written well before 9/11 by Joe Biden and Chertoff and other people, and they couldn't get it passed. After 9/11, the Patriot Act gets renamed and comes in, and it's starting to appear that the Patriot Act was always meant to spy on us and to control the society. But then you add in this, and on a global scale, and they talk a lot in their documents about the whole alliance, all of alliance. So they're not talking about, to stop Russia. No. And like I said, NATO admitted 2 weeks ago what we knew since we did our show on Ukraine, when I called you 6 weeks before it came and I said, they're going to invade Ukraine.
Yeah.
They need to have a war in Ukraine. The narrative was pointing to that. They did everything they could to get Russia to instigate them, and then turned around and remember it all went away. Yep. And I want people to also remember, and I'll show you in a minute something about the Ukraine thing with this kind of warfare. Because the other thing that you need to know about this is they are openly saying that they have technology to manipulate the brains of individuals and groups of individuals with biotechnology, with nanoscience, with nanotechnology, with all kinds of obviously MK Ultra type propaganda, but also all kinds of technology that's coming through your phone, that's coming through your computer. They're also they've teamed up. There's another document that you can also find on my site, and that I'll put for you guys to put in your box too. That includes their relationship with all of social media. And that what they're doing is they're scraping the back end of everything. They're in partnership with Google, they're in partnership with Gavi, they're in partnership with the UN and the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization. So they are taking everyone's data and creating algorithms. Right now would be a good time to play that Noah Harari clip I have for you, because he's a consultant on cognitive warfare. So I think that's probably a good time to show that.
Is nationalism, in your opinion, also something that stems from insecurity?
One way to understand nationalism is that nationalism is about hating foreigners and hating minorities, and it's us versus them. And I think this stems from insecurity, and it does terrible things to the world.
You did talk about how we will reach a point where AI will be able to hack a human.
Yes. What does it mean to hack a human being? It means to understand me better than I understand myself, to be able to predict my feelings, my thoughts, my choices, and increasingly also to manipulate them.
If a corporation can use my behavior online or offline to be able to guess what to sell me,
Yeah.
thereby sort of manipulating my decisions, can this be used politically in the future?
Absolutely. It can be done in politics just as it's done in commerce. And that's a huge danger because, the whole of democratic politics is based on the idea that the government obeys the will of the voters. And that's good. But what happens if the government can manipulate the will of the voters? Then it's like a closed circle.
That is
yeah.
very concerning.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when you dig more into this, some of these
Wow.
documents that they put out there, and what I am saying is that someone is coordinating this worldwide, and when he says that, Harari, and then you hear Klaus Schwab, and then this guy from NATO, and then Bill Gates, and then things similar coming out of even Soros, and we know what's going on in China. China doesn't even hide that they can do this. So you have to wonder what is really going on in America, that they don't see the danger, the full capture of our nation, and that they're so divided that something with Trump triggers decent people to become completely sociopathic. It's very bizarre, and we have groups of illegals, many of them being dumped out of jails, being shipped all over this country right now. And then you hear about some of this technology. So at this innovation hub, which is run by a Frenchman, not an American either, both in Virginia, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and they've been working on this since 2013, this cognitive behavioral technology for battle. It says in this document here, it says that that this is the document, Cognitive Warfare, A Battle for the Brain. You can also find this online. It says it starts with hyperconnectivity. Everyone has a cell phone. It starts with information because information is, if I may say, the fuel of cognitive warfare. But it goes solely for information, and it's a standalone. So it goes on to say it's all about leveraging data. We produce data every minute, and it goes on to talk about data and how they scrape data and that they can create files on people to manipulate that. But then it goes on to say that cognitive warfare is not only a fight against what we think, but it's rather a fight against the way that we think. If we can change the way people think, it's much more powerful. It goes beyond information warfare and psyops. It's crucial to understand that it's a game on our cognition, on the way our brain processes information and turns it into knowledge, rather than solely a game on information or on psychological aspects of our brain. It's not only an action against what we think, but also an action against the way we think, the way we process information and turn it into knowledge. In other words, cognitive warfare is not just another word, another name for information warfare. It is a war on our individual processor, our individual brains. So, and it goes, and it really does go into how the potential by developing new weapons and ways of harming the brain, it has the potential to engage in neuroscience, technology, in many ways, different approaches to influence human ecology, because it's very easy to turn a civilian technology into a military technology. And it goes through all of the ways it does that. And then basically goes on to say, cognitive warfare has universal reach from starting with the individual to states to multinational organizations. It's a field of action, is global and aimed to seize control of the human being, civilians as well as military. The massive worldwide investments made in neuroscience suggest that the cognitive domain will probably be one of the main battlefields of the future. And it goes on to say that they're naming it the sixth. This is so that they can use it in war. They're going on to say that they're going to name it the sixth dimension of warfare. The other ones are land, air, cyber, space, information, but now the brain. And and it goes on to say that the nature of warfare has changed. and that developing capabilities to harm the cognitive abilities of the opponent will be a necessity. In other words, NATO will need to get the ability to safeguard her decisions-making process and disrupt the adversary's ones. So it's saying uses of modern technology with the potential to basically, like Colonel Aquino said in Mind Wars, take down a nation without firing a shot through using smartphones and technology and neuroscience, biotechnology, and the use of research findings. And so it goes on all of that. And then it says the Pentagon is the primary institution advancing this research. And that DARPA and Intelligent and Advanced Research Projects activity at the Pentagon are optimizing performance and resilience, and that basically going forward, they need to capture the psychocultural realm of whatever nation they are attacking. So the kinetic power cannot defeat the enemy, but psychological and related behavioral and social sciences will fill the void. Leveraging social sciences will be central in development of human domain plan operations. So basically going through this document, and there's many other ones. There's one that's fully, I think I also sent to you the one that shows, it's on the cover is a picture of your cell phone, which people should definitely read that one, because that talks about organizing basically Black Lives Matter type Antifa riots and protests in this kind of getting into your brain. Yeah, that's the Fall 2020 Cognitive Warfare manual that a lot of people should check out as well. And the reason I think that this is important is because there's very little to explain what is going on right now in our country or the world in terms of the division and the track and trace and surveillance and the push towards globalism, other than believing that this technology is being used to some extent right now. And the reason, and the thing we have to ask ourselves is, did you get informed consent to have any military, especially our own? And when they have the entire Obama regime up through Milley and Ray and all these people, Merrick Garland, saying that the enemy is essentially MAGA Republicans and anyone that's questioning the government, anti-government and anti-authority. And they have this technology, and we are seeing a demoralization, dehumanization, a weakening of we the people, the inability to organize. And as it goes on in some of these documents, it talks full well also about the total and complete destruction of your ability to think. So there's a whole part in here where they talk about basically that the human brain can be hacked, like Harari said, and kind of shaken up like a snow globe, and unable. It talks about like destabilizing whole societies or specific groups, or making them unable to fight back, unable to think. This is all talking about, Klaus Schwab says, the fourth industrial revolution will not change you. It will change everything about your humanity, all of that. And a lot of this technology also has to do with melding man and machine. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to say one thing that's really been on my mind about this is a lot of people forget, and it's easy to forget, that what happened with Donald Trump and Ukraine. So one of the things that if you go through some of these documents, you're going to find is that they're messing with what, as we talked about a lot in along the way, they're messing with the ability at all to critically think. They're talking about changing the way you think, the way you learn. We're seeing that with online learning, remote learning, Common Core. But I just want to remind people how Ukraine really started, because a lot of people don't remember. And part of this cognitive war, this cognitive dissonance is what's going on now, is that people can't track, because of the news cycle and the information cycle and everything that's happening, and maybe this kind of warfare and whatever else. People can't even put together dots to even see the reality, to see the truth, to see what's going on here. And what we need to tell the audience here is that every single one of us has to be a cognitive warrior. We have to be totally in control of our brain. And when something is fed to us, if we emotionally react right away, step back and wonder and really look at where it's coming from, why it's coming. If something goes viral, I'm telling you, they're controlling what's going viral. They are controlling everything of the message. They are making it the way it is. And right now, their biggest problem is that there are people like us in America that are saying, no, this is the United States of America. We're not going to play along. We have the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and you're going to live by that. And I just wanted to remind everyone as we close out here, what happened when Donald Trump called Ukraine before the Ukraine impeachment. He said, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General, William Barr, would be great, Trump said to Zelensky. Biden went around bragging that he stopped a prosecution. So if you could look into that, it sounds horrible to me. Well, Donald Trump was impeached for that. And here we are. So what I'm saying is the entire narrative of Ukraine started that day, and we are here now. And that's cognitive warfare, in my opinion, and everything else is. So for your audience, thank you so much, everyone. Please look into this. Those documents will be in the. You can text for that. I sent you both documents, I think. If not, I'll send you the one about the big tech alliances and the big academia alliances. But God did not intend for anyone to mess with your brain. This is a separation between you and your God-given intuition and mind and body and power, and they are trying to shut it off, and they have the technology. So we have to be hyper vigilant and really protect ourselves and our connection to God every single day. And I think it's just really important that we realize that is the war. The war is for your brain, and only you can stop it. So I just wanted people to
there's no doubt we're living in an episode of Black Mirror, or something like that.
Yes,
and we have to individually wake up, and then wake up the ones around us, remind them of the details that you mentioned. Please share this episode with people that you know, love, and care about. Text it to them directly, post it, share it. We have to all play a role in this. And Mel, you do a great job making that happen. Again, guys, go to themelkshow.com, register for the newsletter, check out the resource section, and we will see you back here again next time. Thank you so much, Mel.
Thank you so much, Mel.
Our founding fathers evolved the idea that you and I have within ourselves the God-given right and the ability to determine our own destiny. But freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Because the Flyover Conservative podcast and interviewing people, then they recommend somebody, and you kind of backstage at events, the ReAwaken events, different places, you get to meet a lot of people that we didn't even know before the show started. So we get texts from friends, hey, what about this? And does this doctor know this? And so it's kind of a good place to be, kind of Grand Central Station and network and connect. The hub of getting to know people that are making a difference in all their different categories of life. Now, one relationship we have had for actually 25 years before we even started the
quarter of a century.
The podcast. We had a friend. His dad was a mentor of ours, and he's plugging away. And I don't know, every time you turn around, he's in school. I'm like, how smart can you get? I mean, there's only
he ended up with one PhD. We're like, dang.
There's only so many books. You had to have read them all by now.
Yeah. Then he ended up with 2 PhDs. We're like, dang.
Like 2 PhDs.
Okay? Unbelievable.
Authored a book called Thriving in the Economic Tsunami. And that is exactly what we're in. And thriving is exactly what you want to be doing. This is one of the most valuable relationships in Stacy and I's life, and brings us the most amount of peace of anybody that we've been able to be advised by. Not very often you get to sit down with somebody who's super cool and a double PhD.
True.
We're going to dive into something called the debt clock today, and I am pumped to learn about this from Dr. Kirk Elliott.
Yay!
Well, we're back, and we're talking about debt.
Yes.
We've known you so long, we wouldn't have even referred to terms like patriots, because we kind of grew up in this Ronald Reagan kind of thing where everybody loved America.
Yep.
There wasn't a Marxist extreme, even at the Democratic. The Democrats liked America. Mm-hmm. It was kind of a weird time, and that's all changed. One thing that hasn't changed is really you.
You got 2 PhDs. What are you talking about?
Well, he's kind of always in that path here, but he's kind of a consistent stabilizing factor here. So
that is true.
I lost some hair.
We've been sending some shots back.
When we first met you, you had long hair.
I wasn't going to go there.
And a ponytail.
I got my laptop out here because we're going to get into this debt grid here today.
We really need to talk about
the U.S.
this.
debt clock. And it's something we've been looking at quite a bit. People reference it. Colton had a teacher, producer Colton, even back when he was in middle school, that brought this up and was showing this clock. Mm-hmm. And kind of people need to be aware of where we're at debt-wise. And it's like, oh, it was always like, yeah, that'll, sometime. We've left the worst case scenario. That was already quite a while back. But there's new things on this. I think this is a great tool for people to equip themselves and to have and to be looking at.
I mean, it looks like a mess on that screen, but it's categorized really good. So they added a bunch of new stuff over the last week, which is very interesting to me because you and I, the three of us, we've been looking at gold and silver, and it's like the gold to dollar ratio, the silver to dollar ratio, it was like 0, since the beginning of the year. It's like, how can it be 0? And people said, oh, it's because the money supply is, they've changed the currency. It's now rainbow currency or whatever. It's like, no, it's not. It's none of that stuff, right? It's simply the metrics and how they measure it. You can't really divide by 0, right? So or else you're going to get 0. So here's where this starts to explain it, right? So on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a red arrow, and that's the dollar supply. So that's the M2, basically money supply. That would be things like checking accounts, savings accounts, liquid money in your bank accounts, right? That's down $792 billion, right? That's more kind of a recent thing, like from this year. They're pulling money out of the system. So when you actually are measuring the price of gold or silver to a money supply that's actually coming down, you're going to get 0. But we all knew, wait a second, this can't be true. Because Kirk, you keep talking every single week how they're printing money like there's no tomorrow, and that's the root cause of inflation. So how could you say then that they've taken almost $1 billion or $1 trillion out of the money supply? Well, 2 different forms of measuring money supply, right? So the one that we're talking about here is the liquid money in your banks, checking, savings, money markets, things of that nature. Okay. There's another money supply called MZM that actually measures everything. Stimulus money that just goes to other countries like Ukraine for foreign aid and stuff like that. They stopped measuring that 1 year ago, right? Because they don't want people to actually know how much we actually are printing. So this is why we're seeing inflation, right? Because they're printing money like there's no tomorrow to fund, what's called euro dollars, the world reserve currency, the petrodollar. None of that's really impacted by this. So in theory, if you were to raise the M2 money supply, as you're printing all this money and you would allow people to actually have it, they would spend it and it would help stimulate the economy. But they're doing the worst, right? They're printing money that causes inflation, then they're pulling money that we can actually capture out of the system, which actually has a double whammy horrible effect on the economy, right? So now what they added here, which is really good, is the 10 and the 5 year kind of numbers for gold and silver, because the decreasing of the money supply only started happening this year, right? So if you look back at that chart on the right hand side, we'll start with silver. The 10 year. So if you go back to 1913, actually, when the Federal Reserve started, what was silver cost per ounce? Like $2.69. What is it over the last 10 years, the average? Without manipulation, just with the increase in the money supply, silver should be $1,121 an ounce. See, this
but it's
is
not.
I mean, this is where like frequent interviewees that you've had with like Bo Polney and stuff, where they come up with some of these numbers, is because without manipulation, with the increase in money supply, this is where it should be. But you'll see this is accelerating. Over the last 5 years, the number is over $1,500 per ounce. So it's in just 5 years, it's gone from 1,100 to 1,500. This is where it should be. So when I tell people, it's like, I think silver is going to hit $75 to $100 an ounce over the next 12 to 18 months. Am I God? Do I control the markets? No, it's just a projection, right? But when you look at where it should be without manipulation based on the money supply growth, well, I could be the biggest dunce on the planet and be 50% off, right? And it's like, all right, that still puts silver at $600 an ounce. I could be dumber than dumb and be 90% off. And that puts silver at $155 an ounce.
Wow.
Well, I mean, and that's if I'm dumber than dumb and I'm 90% wrong, right? And it's like, man, so this is crazy. Now, gold is it's not as pronounced as silver, which is why we're allocating into silver. But gold, and it was $27 an ounce in 1913 when the Federal Reserve became a thing with the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, right? So outside of, manipulation or anything like that, the money supply growth says that gold should be over $9,300 an ounce over the last 10 years. But over the last 5 years, it should be over $12,000 an ounce. That's where it should be based on the money supply growth since 1913. So when people say, Kirk, is gold and silver prices manipulated? Yeah. This number shows that they are. But even with that, we're still seeing silver go over 100% in price since March of 2020, when it was $11.91. Now it's pushing 23. That's still not a bad return. But the point I'm making is, in this world that we're living in, with the inflationary pressures that we're seeing, this is where it should be. That's incredible. Because we could be so far wrong in our projection and still have an amazing return, that this is something spectacular to look at. Now, if you look at this chart and you go down to where the big red bar is, kind of 80% of the way down the screen, it talks about, that right there. This is what tells me that gold and silver are going to absolutely go through the roof. Social Security is $22 trillion, expenditure moving forward. Look at some of these other things, but look at the unfunded U.S. liabilities. These are things that Congress has already passed. That just hasn't funded, because they passed things like into the future. We're looking at $194 trillion of future debt that we haven't actually funded yet, that they've already passed. Like we talked about at the beginning of the show, if you start pulling away things that have already passed, you're going to have a mutiny on your hands, because it's easy to get something. It's hard to pull something back.
You can vote yourself into socialism. It's really hard to vote yourself out of it.
It is. Yeah, and they've already passed $194 trillion worth of spending bills that we haven't funded yet. That is absolute insanity, which is why they're going to keep raising the debt ceiling, right? Because these are voters, not people to them. They're voters. They want their votes. And I don't see an end of this rainbow that has a pot of gold at the end of it that's like a nice outcome for people. Now,
for the dollar,
if you own gold and you own silver, like those silver prices and gold prices, what they should be, that is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? Because you allocate properly into this inflationary mess, into this debt spiral, that you can't fabricate these numbers. They are what they are. I think U.S. Debt Clock does a really good job on just kind of pulling everything together. Now, you need to interpret those data, because those points mean nothing to most people. But when you understand what they really are, it paints a wild picture for where we are in this economy.
So let me ask you a question. This is probably going to sound dumb, but why does it have the arrows going from, because we're not putting it on the screen, it's on that screen, the arrows going from the gold and silver up to the dollar supply?
Because as the money supply decreases, you can't divide by zero, right? So you're dividing by this negative number, it's going to show a 0.
Okay.
Right. So that's what it's trying to point out is gold and silver technically aren't 0, obviously, right? They're not 0. We have to pay for them. But when you look at it, see the decrease in the money supply just started happening this year. They're starting to pull money out to actually prepare us for central bank digital currency. That's my number one reason why money supply is decreasing. Right. But when you look at the last 5 or 10 years, which is more than just the last year of decreasing money supply, when they actually measured how much money was going into circulation, how much money they're printing. And it put silver at over $1,100 an ounce, gold at over $9,000 an ounce at the most conservative estimate. It's like, oof, that's amazing to me that we're in the right place at the right time taking advantage of this, because it's obvious the numbers aren't 0. Gold's $2,000 an ounce, silver's, $23 an ounce. But it will show up as 0 as long as you've got a money supply, M2 money supply at the banks that's actually decreasing, which it is. But that doesn't tell us the true story. The true story tells us outside of the M2 money supply, and that's how much money is being printed out of thin air to fund every stimulus under the sun.
Wow. That's interesting.
It's interesting also, you got the G7 GDP in the bottom right to gold ratio, 72,000 per ounce. BRICS GDP to gold ratio, 134,000.
Because that's brand new on there too. Is that right, Dr. Kirk?
That's brand new on there too, because they're starting to measure, which I think that's interesting why they put that on there.
Yeah.
Because they're starting to measure where the world is headed. When you look at the BRICS nations, they're almost 70% of the world's population come January 1st with the countries that they added. Their GDP matters, right? When it's that big of a trading block. So now they're starting to and why do they put that in there? Because the BRICS nations want to back their central bank digital currency with gold. That's why they're putting that in there, right? And so it's like, oh, what does that tell us? How much does gold have to be if they're going to back all of those currencies? It's like it becomes an astronomical number, which is, again, why I feel so good about saying that. I think gold's going to hit $5,000 to $10,000 an ounce, easy cheesy, right? I think silver's going to hit 75 to 100. When you look at these numbers of where they should be and where they could be without manipulation, it's out of this world. It's absolutely out of this world.
Man, I love this because it's a relationship that we have with you. So let's say that right now, Flyover family, we go into silver and then things change and you're like, oh my gosh, now it's time to go into gold. You actually walk us through that process. It's not a one-time transaction. It's not like, oh, I bought silver, now I'm done. It's like you walk us through and you say, hey, this would be a great time to change over to gold. Maybe later it's something else, but this is a relationship that we develop with you and what you're doing there.
Yeah, we'll hold your hand through the economy moving forward. We never want you to be on your own because it's hard, when you're created and gifted and anointed to do something else. It's like, well, I don't know about this stuff. It's okay. We do, right? This is what we help partner with you on. So it's your money. It's God's money, right? But our job is to point you in the right direction so you can be a wise steward with that and be in the right place at the right time. So that's what we're here for, is to actually do just that. But it's more than that to us. It's not just about the relationship, which is key. Not many other firms do that. It's that, what do you go into, right? Should you go into gold? Should you go into silver? Should you go into rare coin? Should you go into bullion? Should you go back into stocks or bonds when the time is right? There's a time and place for everything, right? Absolutely, for everything. And this is where we will help navigate through all of that, so you can make a wise decision, be in the right place at the right time. Because at some point down the road, hopefully we get a change in presidency or change in Congress that actually has policies of pro-economic growth again, and the stock market will boom. But until then, I don't really want to touch it because I think it's toxic.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I love it too. And I love that the percentage that's paid up to your firm is up front, but not at the end. So when they go to sell, there's nothing that we pay you in the sell of that, because
you capture all the profit,
capture all the profit, which is huge.
Yeah, and our clients love that. I mean, literally, I don't know the exact number, but it's got to be pushing 70% of all of our clients aren't just one purchase only.
Wow.
Right, which goes back to that relationship model.
Yep.
They purchase time and time and time and time again.
Right.
And they start with one IRA, they do more IRAs, they make one allocation, then they start to do systematically month after month after month, right? It's that to me, it's not a badge of honor. But I'm biased towards my own team because I think that they're amazing and they bend over backwards to help people, right? And they really care about people. And the fact that so many of our clients keep doing business over and over and over again is a testament to how we love people.
Yep.
Because they keep coming back to allocate more because they've enjoyed the journey and they enjoy the journey, the ongoing journey of having somebody hold their hand through this economy. And I love that. I mean, it's just, I don't take it lightly. I wake up every morning and practically pinch myself. It's like, God, you've really entrusted us with a lot and we're doing well. You're blessing and we're helping as we help people, right? And we've got, I mean, clients all over the world.
Wow.
All over the world. And it's like, if you'd see me half the time, it's like, well, Kirk, and all of your viewers have, it's like, usually he wears like a t-shirt and I don't know why I'm wearing a collared shirt. I think it's an artifact of the wedding last weekend. It's some of my wedding clothes, right? Because it's collared shirt. What's up with Dr. Kirk?
What happened?
But I just wear jeans and t-shirts most of the time, but we try to give really good info, and that's what it's all about to me. It's just a real person, just a regular guy, right? That God has gifted to decipher some of this stuff.
It's almost like just regular people, like our listeners ourselves. No offense calling you regular people, but you probably are.
I'm a regular person.
Yeah, I'm a regular person.
Yeah. But you got your own guy on the inside now.
Yeah.
Somebody that I think Madeleine Albright and the kind of people that were in the circles where you were at the school. Some of these kind of big name characters, like the places that you've been and the things that it's like we have our own guy. On the inside, I kind of feel like that. It's kind of like I know a guy. So it really does help.
I do too. So to start this relationship, Flyover family, if you've not yet talked to Dr. Kirk's team, you have to do it because they're absolutely amazing. Everywhere that we go, we travel all across the United States with the ReAwaken America event and other events, and people are always coming up to us and talking about Doctor, how much they love that relationship, how much they love the team. To get that started, go to flyovergold.com. When you do, you scroll down to the bottom. There's a place you can fill out your information. When you do that, it's a free consultation. It doesn't cost you any money at all to get this relationship started. You could also call 720-605-3900. Again, it's 720-605-3900. Dr. Kirk, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for explaining this to us so that we can have a better understanding of how it works. And thank you also for helping us to walk through this process to get ourselves out of the way of what's going on with our money, but to be safe during this time. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Are you having a hard time sleeping at night, thinking, what am I going to do about my finances?
Times are really changing. They're changing fast. Let me give you a quick example of how. In 1920, if you had a $20 bill and 1 ounce of gold, you could go into any men's clothing store and buy an entire suit. You could buy the jacket, the shirt, the belt, shoes, the whole bit. Today, that $20 bill, what's it going to get you?
Not much.
Maybe the socks, maybe a handkerchief, but the 1 ounce of gold could still buy you the entire suit at any men's store in America. That's the difference. That's what inflation does to your dollar. It's a deflating dollar caused by inflation. Now today, that's happening faster than ever. You need somebody that you trust that can help get you out of a fake currency and into something that's going to keep you safe.
And we know a guy that has 2 PhDs by the name of Dr. Kirk Elliott. We have known him for over 25 years, and he's someone we completely trust.
You need somebody that you can get a hold of, somebody that's going to be there for you to get back out of it, and then maybe back into the stock market, maybe back into something else when things settle down. But right now is not that time. You need somebody that you trust and somebody you can call and make those worries go away.
That's exactly right. So you can go to flyovergold.com, fill out your information for a free consultation, or you can call 720-605-3900. Do it today.
You'll be glad you did.
For more great content, go to flyoverconservatives.com.